One of the challenges in higher ed marketing is that we don't really have an association that's completely dedicated to us. We are the RCMO. I mean, presidents have ACE and, NICU, and the VP of Student Affairs has NASPA. The business officer has NACUBO. The chief marketing officer cannot point to their professional association. They don't have one. It's really astonishing that it hasn't emerged in the marketplace yet. And so we've tried to fill that gap.
Have you ever wondered what makes some companies grow while others plateau or fade away? Or what makes an inspirational leader versus someone who teams dread working for? On this podcast, the executive team at Thinc Strategy chat with business leaders who share their lessons and journeys, their strategies on growth and leadership, and how they're continuously thinking ahead. On today's episode, Thinc Strategy's Cindy Anderson and Karen Albritton welcome Elizabeth Johnson, founder and chairman of Simpson Scarborough. Over the last 30 years, Elizabeth has helped more than 300 institutions research, develop, and implement plans to increase visibility, strengthen enrollment, raise money, and advance higher education brands. Here's Thinc Strategy advisor, Karen Albritton.
So, Elizabeth, I love the story of how you got started with Simpson Scarborough and just some of the early things that happened in your journey as an owner. Can you talk a little bit about the founder's story?
Oh, absolutely. It's not all the happiest story, but it all worked out in the end. So I didn't start Simpson Scarborough is really the answer. Simpson Scarborough's predecessor was a company called Simpson Consulting. And many people in our industry know a guy named Christopher Simpson. He worked at Indiana University under Miles Brand. And when the Bobby Knight issue exploded at Indiana University, Christopher, who was sort of, managing the crisis at the time, he had to personally fire Bobby Knight.
Oh, my
God.
Wow.
You can imagine he was not a popular guy in Indiana. So he had to leave the state. And that's when he branched off and started a consulting firm called Simpson Consulting. And Christopher had been my client at Indiana University. We worked very closely together. And so we'd known each other for years. And he went off and started his own consulting firm, did that for a couple of years, and then decided that he wanted to grow it. And was working with a consultant, kind of like you, Karen, and Thinc Strategy, and that organization that he was working with told him to go and find some partners who would expand his business. So he came to me first, and it was really interesting because I was working for another company at the time. I'd been there for about 10 years, and I thought that I was imminently happy. I loved the company that I worked with. I loved the people. I was really happy where I was, but it was a family-run business, so I would never be an owner. I didn't have the right last name, and I was already married, so couldn't marry in, couldn't get in, didn't have the right name. And so Christopher called me up one day and said, "Hey, I know you come down to Virginia to visit your parents. So next time you come down here, let's get together." So a couple months later, I went down to Virginia, and Christopher and I were set to meet. And I'll never forget the day that we met because I was so busy with work. I was just absolutely swamped. And I remember saying to my dear old dad, who's 85 years old now, I said, "Dad, I'm going to skip this meeting. I'm not going to leave my company. I got this great job. I love my job. I'm not going to go start a company with this guy." Because Christopher had already tipped me off about what he wanted to talk about. And my dad put his finger right in my face. And he said, "You go to that meeting. Go and you at least listen to the guy."
Good for Dad.
It's all because of him. And so I went and sat with Christopher for about 2 hours at the Richmond airport. And Christopher scribbled furiously on a yellow legal pad all of his ideas for the company that he wanted us to build together. And he just furiously, that was his style. We're going to do this, we're going to do that. And here's how the whole vision for the company. And I drove back to my parents' house 2 hours later and told my dad I'm going to start a company.
Oh,
wow.
Yeah, congratulations.
Not start a company, but start something new from something that was already in existence. And that's when Simpson Scarborough was born.
Terrific. And then early on, I mean, what's interesting, Christopher was crisis communications. You were market research.
Correct.
And the firm shifted because when I met you, you were focused more on the research piece of the business. So how did the firm evolve?
Well, that's the sad part of the story. We started the company in February of 2006, and later that year, Christopher got cancer.
Wow.
And it was everywhere. It was in 17 places in his body.
Oh,
I mean,
no.
it was melanoma. Wear your sunscreen. And he passed about 18 months after we found out. So he passed on right about the 2-year anniversary of the firm. So in February of 2008. And it was devastating, obviously, personally and professionally. I mean, it was one of those moments where you think, I mean, I know I thought at one point, well, maybe I'll just open a little antique shop somewhere.
Right.
Yeah.
What am I going to do now?
Yeah. You raise an important, I think, an issue here that a lot of entrepreneurs in the early stages don't think about, and that's business continuity. And, what do you do when the unthinkable occurs, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And how are you supposed to know what key man insurance is?
Right.
I go to my lawyers and I'm like, well, why didn't we have key man insurance? We got a lot of it now, but I never need it again, but yeah, it's just one of those bumps in the road. You just can't even imagine that you're going to hit, and really at that point, you've got a choice. I mean, after I panicked, and grieved, because Christopher he was just it's such an incredible professional relationship with him. Those 2 years that I had with Christopher were, for me personally, the most transformative years of my career. I mean, he was so different than me in style and presence and approach and thought. And I just learned so much from him. I learned from him every single day I had him. I'm so thankful to this day that I had that time with him. So after panicking, after grieving, then I just put my nose on the grindstone. I mean, what can you do?
Yeah.
You place your nose firmly on the grindstone, you start working harder than you ever thought you ever could, to turn it into something else. And what I had to do was refocus the business around my specialty. I knew that because I was I owned the large majority of the company. I think I owned 88% of the company at that point, because of how Christopher's shares were redistributed. And so I knew I had to refocus it around something that I knew how to do really well. And my specialty was market research. So we were more full service when we started, but we became solely a research firm once Christopher passed. But then, of course, we grew from there. I know you have questions about that too.
Yeah.
Yes, one of the things that I think is really hard in those moments when you own a business, particularly since it was really his concept. You had the 2 years to really get engaged with it. But I admire your decision to say, okay, now I just have to pivot. So fast forward and tell us some of the major decisions that you made after you decided on this pivot that you think has led to your greatest successes today.
Oh, gosh. Well, you know what? It's funny. I think, one of the first major decisions was to grow. I mean, you have to make a decision to grow.
That's
you don't
right.
grow by accident. You make a decision to grow. And I remember when I started with Christopher, this is funny. You'll love this. When I started with Christopher, I remember it actually coming out of my mouth that I never wanted the firm to be bigger than 10 people. In my mind, in my last company, that's where everything changed. For me, that was like this benchmark where then you got to think about running the business, right? You can't just do the work, right? And for me, it's always been about the work. I love the work. I love working with clients. I love writing survey instruments. I love analyzing data. Of course, that's my specialty. So the work is what always captivated me. And I had this idea in my mind that once you get above 10 people, then you got to think about running the business. All of these things are going to distract from, actually being able to do the work. And, but your own limitations are meant to be blown through. And that's exactly what I did. I mean, I just decided that wasn't good enough, and we started to grow. And so that was really the first big decision was to get bigger than 10 people. And we blew right through it. I can't even remember when. The second big decision was to bring on some new partners. The first new partner that I brought on, it's really interesting to juxtapose these big decisions. The first partner I brought on was someone from my old company. It's a guy named Jeff Papa, who is the greatest human that ever lived, by the way. Just an incredible human being. I adore him. We had so much fun working together. But what was interesting about Jeff is that he was just like me. We had grown up in the business together. He thought just like me. We were different in terms of how we worked, but we thought similarly. We had similar specialties, and that's why I had to keep bringing on partners, because the next big partner decision that I made was Jason Simon, our current CEO. And Jason was nothing like me. And that's what made the partnership really, really great. And it was interesting, bringing on partners is it's like getting married, right? And separating from partners is like getting divorced. It's very, very difficult in both directions. And I knew though, I knew there was a Jason out there for me, then I knew I needed him. I can tell you that it was 4 to 5 years that I was looking for another business partner, looking for someone to challenge me, looking for someone to extend me, looking for someone who was better than me in a lot of ways. Because none of us are perfect. We all have our strengths, our weaknesses. Definitely true for me. And I knew I needed someone. I needed someone to bounce ideas off of. I needed someone to help me think through things and rattle me out of my cage. And the interesting thing about Jason is that I knew he was the one the moment I met him. It was like love at first sight.
That's amazing.
Wow, that is amazing.
And you guys do make such a good yin and yang. I'm a big believer that as long as your values align and you can align on where you want to take something and who's going to do what, you can be successful. If you can sell, you can be successful. But it's not always easy to find that complementary skill set. That's really hard. So that's amazing.
So Elizabeth, did you have a sense of what you were looking for? Did you know the types of had you done anything like back of the envelope planning of this is what I need to find?
Yes, I did. I knew I needed to extend the business, right? I mean, one of the things that was really kind of lucky for me is that in our line of services, I did the market research, which was the first step to a series of other steps. So it was clear what I needed to extend my business. I mean, it was just like, plopping the yellow brick road down in front of me, and so I knew I needed someone with specialty in that next area, right? And the one after that. And that's where Jason really was exceptional. He's really good at marketing strategy, right? So he can take my data and turn it into a plan, right? And a strategy. And then he had a lot of experience with creative, which is the next step after that. So I knew I wanted someone who would extend the business. And so, it was just a matter of sort of assessing the professional skills in that area. And then also looking at the human being, because I think that's 85% of it is finding just a good person, someone who is honest and loyal and kind. And, Jason and I we were both yin on that.
Yes.
Right. And then on our skill set, we were yin and yang.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
So, fast forward a little bit with Jason, he joined as a partner, and I think at that time you didn't have titles beyond there was a partner. So, and then he moved into, I think, a COO role, and now he's CEO, and you've moved into chair. And when I tell people about you, or when, I'm sure some people say, wow, she gave up the CEO role. How does that work with her still being there? And I guess I would just ask you to talk a little bit about that progression and why you turned over the day-to-day leadership.
Well, honestly, Karen, when people ask me that question, I quote you because I don't know if you remember this, but you told, as we were going through that transition or talking about it, you said something really wonderful to me. You looked me right in the eye. I'll never forget it. And you said, Elizabeth, you were the perfect person to start this company and get it to this point. And Jason is the perfect person to take the baton from you now. And it's true. I mean, there's just, we got to a point where I can't tell you how I came to this. I just know it deep down in that he was the right person to take the company from where it was to where we wanted it to go. And it was in February of 2020 that I made him CEO.
Of course.
Great timing.
Perfect timing.
Yep.
I mean, I'm really smart. You just don't, I mean, it worked out great. So, all kidding aside, with COVID happening just a couple of weeks later, it was just the right time. And I think, I too, Karen, have had a lot of people ask me, like, why would you do that? Why would you, just turn over your baby to someone else? And I just don't have any, I don't have any trouble recognizing what my limitations are. I mean, I'm really good at the work that I do, and really good at client relationships, really good at generating business, building a presence in the marketplace. I am not a good manager of people. I'm just not. It's not. I love everybody. I mean, I'm not good at giving like honest feedback. My honest feedback for everyone is, I love you. You're so great. So it's just, I'm not a good manager, right? It's just not. It's not. If I do Strengths Finder, Achiever comes up, but whatever's related to management doesn't come up. It's not how I'm wired. And I knew we were getting big enough. We probably had maybe 45 people on the team at that point. We were really growing. We'd been working with you for a couple years. So you were doing your thing with us. It was working. And it was just time. It was time for him to take over and create more structure, and provide the kind of management scaffolding that we needed to really create the kind of culture that we wanted and to continue to have the kind of success that we were seeking.
I commend you for that, because I think more owners should think about that as an option before they sell. Because what I see is more people sell not because they're really ready to sell the business, not because it's at its best value or they don't like the work or whatever. They just don't want to run the company, and they don't know that's what it is. They don't know that the managing of the people is not really what they signed up for. Or maybe they like managing the people, but they don't like some of the other things. I think that's very self-aware, and really a smart business owner puts the best person in the role, not themselves. And even sometimes if it is us, we still have to think of putting someone else in the role and helping them and mentoring them if we don't want to be tied to it 24/7.
Right. Yeah. And I don't understand why more people don't consider it, because I'm still majority shareholder.
Right. You can still own it. You can get all of the value for the growth you're doing together. And yes.
Yeah, I will. Yeah. And Elizabeth, I don't know how comfortable you'll be talking about this part, because there's the leadership part of it. But I've also been watching you. You brought in partners. You found ways to share the equity, to share the ownership in a way. And that can sometimes seem to be a hurdle. But I don't know if you can talk about your thinking about why you want to have other partners, why you don't want to own it all.
Oh, gosh. I mean, I could still own it all, and it would be a lot smaller and a lot less valuable. That's the point, right? I mean, and you actually, Karen, have slapped my hand a couple of times, like, stop selling your company for such a discounted rate.
Right.
Yeah.
But who's going to have the last laugh, right? Because now the company's much, much bigger than it would have ever been if I had held on to all that equity. And so I just, it's funny, because someone one time referred to me as generous. And I was like, I'm not generous. I'm just making an investment. So the people are worth it. You've got to bring in the right people. You've got to incentivize them, give them the equity, get them the skin in the game. And then they're going to work their asses off, right? Just like you do. So, if you can find the right people, it didn't bother me at all to sell, to transfer that equity at a discounted rate. I mean, it's been worth every penny of it, and the company's grown because of it. So to me, it just seemed like a smart business decision.
Absolutely. Well, you've grown by adding services. I know that you mentioned that sort of that yellow brick road of services. You've certainly grown by adding talent. There also came a time where you all grew through acquisition, and I'd love for you to share a little bit more about what led you to think about that path.
Yeah, so it was an interesting story. We acquired a web design firm called Noble, Knowble, Noble. for us, it ended up just being an ideal way to accomplish an acquisition. So what happened was we were extending our services, as I said, right? We started with market research, then we added marketing strategy, then we added creative. And what do you do after you get your creative? Well, a lot of times you have to build a website, right? You have to build a digital strategy. So that was a logical next little, step in the path. And so we had been partnering with Noble for over a year. And this is what made the transition so seamless, because we had been working on projects with them, multiple projects over, 18 months or so, and loved their people. Great working relationship, had integrated what do we do? How does it feed into what they do? How does the management work? I mean, they were, for all intents and purposes, already a part of our company when we acquired them. And so I love this strategy of first partnering, and then and now, then we were just outsourcing, right? We had outsourced something, we outsourced it to Noble. Mm-hmm. Now we're looking at, we are intentionally partnering with firms that we eventually either want to acquire or merge with, so that we can see. It's almost like you do all the hard work before the acquisition even happens, right? Mm-hmm. All the integration. And so once we acquired Noble, which was, by the way, one of the most fun things I've ever done. I mean, I felt like I was going shop after that acquisition happened. I thought, oh, what else can I buy? Right. Like a shopping fever, I mean, I don't like to shop for clothes or, anything like that, but boy, shopping for companies, that was fun. And it was really, really fun to go through that process and, for the first time, and negotiate the deal, work out the terms of the deal. We worked very closely with you, Karen, on it. You were instrumental in helping us get that done. And it was really invigorating and sort of, injected some real excitement into the company and for me personally. But after the acquisition happened, the transition was like nothing. I mean, it was just, we went right into it like we never missed a beat. And the best thing that we got out of it was the owner of Noble, who is now our SVP.
Oh, wow.
No
That's
clue.
Great.
No clue what a gem this guy was. I mean, we knew he was great. We knew we loved him. His name's Bob Rafferty. He's fantastic. And it gives me chills even talking about him, because we just, we bought the services and the book of business and the people that were on the team. That's what we thought we were getting. And we ended up getting so much more. I mean, Bob is now a partner in the company. He's the SVP. He runs all of our operations. He's just fantastic. So we got really lucky with that one.
It sounds like, though, it was really proactive getting lucky, because to your point, a lot of people do project work together and they talk about this, but either it doesn't happen or you don't really get down to the brass tacks. But the way you did it, I think is so smart for both sides, because if you're going to have a problem, it's going to be in how you deliver a project. The other stuff, you can just make rules and everybody will either agree to it or give their feedback. But when it comes to delivering work, that's where you needed the synergy, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Elizabeth, I know that you all have probably also gotten many offers to be acquired. I mean, you could be on the other side of that table negotiating to sell. When that happens, how do you think about those?
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, man, the emails from private equity, geez, they're like almost daily, right? I mean, it's just crazy. There's a lot of money out there looking to be invested. And I ignore a lot of it. I got to be honest with you. And just because I don't want to be too influenced externally. I want the motivation to come from inside of us and thinking about what's best for our business, not just an opportunity grab. Right. Mm-hmm. And so we think really, really carefully about, when we're approached. Most of the time when you're approached, you're getting the same email that about 1,000 other companies are getting. And it's funny, like when you first start getting those, it's like, ooh, we're so great. Once you start getting one every day, you're like, they don't even know who we are, So you start realizing it's not as exciting as it is in the beginning. But we're real deliberate about it. I mean, we've gotten a lot of good advice from companies like yours about what to look for and how to think about our next steps. We've been working with, Karen for years now, thinking about the future of our business. I mean, when you started working with us, Karen, we had less than 20 employees, and now we're about 80. I mean, we're a wholly different company than we were when we started. And I attribute a lot of that success to your incredible counsel and guidance. And so I think, the key is to have your own plan, right? Not to be listening to someone else telling you what your plan could be or should be, right? I mean, it's to really find your own internal drivers and think about what you want your company to become. And that's what we've done. And we're just being as calculated and deliberate as possible to get it there.
One of the things that you said that really strikes me too is being deliberate also builds trust within your team, because everyone probably knows that you could, as a majority shareholder, take the money and run and go be done with it all or what have you. But I think that your transparency with that group, making them equity partners so they know what's going on, they're part of the decision, and that has helped you scale, I really think is part of your secret sauce. Getting the right people first, having, the right client base too. You've been very deliberate about your client base and how that aligns with your cultural values within your team. So I think kudos to you for that. How hard is it when you're going after a client and you're looking at whether or not you want to work with them, how hard is it to turn someone away? Do you ever have to do that?
Oh, sure. Oh, sure. Yes. And I don't want to name any names.
Right. Of course. No name dropping here.
Yeah.
But that's a tough thing to do. I mean, it's, especially in a business like ours. I mean, we're a marketing agency, right? And so, the relationship, if the relationship is weak, the project's going to be a nightmare for everybody on both sides, right? And nobody wants that. And it is very, very difficult, when you've got a bottom line goal to meet, to say no to any piece of business, right? I think, but anybody who's ever done it knows when it's required and when it's the right thing to do. And as hard as it can be, I'm sorry I keep talking about Karen so much, but Karen's the one who
hey, I love it.
I know.
I'm getting a little uncomfortable here.
Seriously, she's the one who said, you got to start turning down these projects that are not right for you. You really drilled that into us. Don't just grab at any piece of business that you can get because you need the revenue, right? I mean, it's a tough long-term strategy to learn and to implement. But for us, it's been really, really instrumental because we've eliminated these situations where we're stretching to meet the goals of a project. You never want to be stretching to meet the goal. I mean, maybe some people do, but that's not the kind of business that I want to run. And that might be fine for somebody else, right? Take a piece of business that you're not sure you can deliver on and learn how to do it. That's a great way to stretch and grow a company. I'm all for that. But doing too much of it and hurting your reputation in the process and damaging a client in the process, that's just not worth it to me. It kills culture, which is really important to me. And so it's, learning to say no and only taking the projects that you can deliver, that you can just knock them way out of the park, right? You're going to do awesome. It's a tough level of discipline to implement across the organization. It's tough for an owner, right, to turn that business away. But it's been one of the best things that we've learned how to do. And it's, Karen taught us.
I think one of the things that really occurs to me when you're talking about Karen is every successful business leader has a mentor that they work with or a coach or someone that they, almost everyone we talked to on podcasts so far, they'll talk about, well, this person that was so valuable to me, right? Mm-hmm. And so I really appreciate you saying that because I personally have a coach. Ravila Gupta is my coach. And I find that I always think, oh, I probably don't need to talk to her. And then we'll get on the call and I'm like, oh my God, thank goodness I talked to her today, because I think you do need a sounding board sometimes to make sure that what you said about what you want is what you're doing. Because so many times we get caught up in, for me, I get caught up in the competition of it all, right? And sometimes just having someone say, is that really what you want to do? Is that really how you want to move forward? And just her asking me that question, I'm like, I now have to think about that a little more, which really, so I appreciate what you're saying. It's about having advisors in they're doing it for the same reason you're doing what you do for clients, to add value, not to make it about me, not to make it about Karen or make it about Elizabeth, but to make it about what you're trying to achieve. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah. It's been great to see all the growth at Simpson Scarborough, to see the progress, and not only the progress within the agency, but the impact that you're having in the industry. And I saw that definitely during the pandemic, when it really had such a tremendous impact on higher education and learning and all of those things. And I wonder if you might talk a little bit about some of the things. I mean, how you all think about how you not only serve clients, but how you serve your industry.
Oh gosh, it's funny. We've always committed maybe even too much time to trying to serve the whole industry. And I think if I had to point to what I think it stems from, I got involved in the American Marketing Association 6 months after I graduated from college. I mean, I was working for a tiny little agency in Washington, D.C. They sent me to an AMA symposium. There were 119 people there for the higher ed marketing symposium. So it was teensy tiny. But right from that sort of the very beginning, I got involved and engaged with the higher ed marketing community. And so it was just always a part of the DNA of my work life, to be involved and wanting to participate and to learn and contribute. And so throughout my entire career, I've been, trying to contribute content and to help the industry, to facilitate sharing between institutions. And once I owned a whole company that could dedicate resources to it, then we could really ramp it up. And so that's why we conduct, multiple studies a year that we pay for ourselves, that we deliver to the world for free. And we just put it out there. It's just part of who we are. It's part of our makeup and our DNA. And I'm so glad we do it. One of the challenges in higher ed marketing is that we don't really have an association that's completely dedicated to us. Our CMO, this is the only cabinet member that doesn't have, think about it, right? Presidents have ACE and, NICU, and the VP of Student Affairs has NASPA, the business officer has NACUBO, the development officer has CASE, the enrollment officer has NACAC and ACRO. The chief marketing officer cannot point to their professional association. They don't have one. It's really astonishing that it hasn't emerged in the marketplace yet. And so we've tried to fill that gap, because we have the ability to, and because it's an unmet need. We're not going to become an association, right? We're not a nonprofit, and we don't want to lobby either. We've looked into it and have been coached. Don't do it. So we won't. But we try to bring some of that same connective tissue that an association typically brings to a community. And I hope, before the end of my career, that we'll see something like that emerge in the marketplace, because it would be such a huge benefit to these professionals. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of higher ed marketing professionals out there who would benefit from an association that was solely dedicated to them. And so we've just tried to contribute. And it's worked out great. It's worked out great. It's a marketing tool at the same time. That's not why we do it. It's a side benefit. But the reason we do it is because we can and because it's needed. And it's just, it feels really good. We love it. We love getting people together. We love sharing information with the higher ed community. And we're just going to keep doing it as much as we can afford to.
I love it. Well, one final question for you, and that is, with all that you've done so far and everything that you're still juggling today, how do you think ahead?
I love that question. One of the things I have to say, I got two answers to that. One of them is being open to the universe. Think about the story I told you about how Christopher came to me and said, "Hey, do you want to start a company?" And I, initially wanted to close myself off from that and say, "No, that's not going to happen. I can't do that. That's not has never been my aspiration." but you need to be open to things like that. And, same thing with finding Jason. I was just kind of open, exposed, like, I need a partner. When are you going to show yourself to me? Right.
Yes.
And knowing what you want and being open for it to appear, manifesting it, in a way. So that's one way to think ahead. But another way, the second answer to that question, and this is just because I'm a researcher by training, is, you think ahead by thinking back, right? Looking at the data and the trend lines.
Yeah.
That's the other thing, looking back and seeing what's been happening, right? And trying to, look at the trajectory of those trends can really, and look at what's going on in the environment and, history. It's the best teacher. So I think that's probably the most important thing, is that I think ahead by thinking back.
You are so great. Those were two really, really great pieces of advice for people, because you're so right. What we put our minds to is what we manifest, right? Because most, if we're achievers, well, that typically where we put our focus is where we're going to spend our time. You are fantastic, and we can't thank you enough for sharing your story and for being a part of the podcast today. I know so many of our listeners are going to get a lot out of this, Elizabeth, because you're doing it the right way. And kudos to you and Jason and everyone on your team.
Thank you.
Oh, gosh. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's so great to see both of you. I loved it and really enjoyed it. It's always, fun to talk about this thing that I love so much. So thanks so much for having me.
Thanks, Elizabeth. This has been fantastic.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Think Ahead. We hope you've gained some valuable insight and inspiration to propel your business forward. Remember, success is not a destination, but a journey, and Think Strategy is here to help you every step of the way. Visit thinkstrategy.com. That's THINC strategy.com for more info. And for more of this podcast, press the follow button and share with your network. This podcast is edited and produced by Earfluence. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you again soon on Think Ahead.